Inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this important hearing. I also want to thank the ambassador for reaching out really to both sides. I know you've had a lot of meetings. You've got a lot more meetings you're going to do, so I appreciate you doing that on a bipartisan basis. I also want to just echo what many of my colleagues have said in terms of enforcement. My experience, I happened to be in Beijing 20 years ago as a part of the U.S. Chamber and a delegation there. Intellectual properties was a big issue back 20 years ago. In terms of the theft, and I'm not sure how far, there hasn't been any or much progress on that. It's still, as you know, a big challenge. And the thought is, whether the agreement's 150 pages or 1,000 pages, what I've learned in my business career, the agreement's only as good as the two parties involved. So I just want to go on record also concerned about the enforcement. I'm for free trade, but it's got to be fair, and we got to level the playing field. I want to switch gears to, I touched base with you the other day, but it's a big issue in Florida, and I think across the country, fentanyl. Last year, 77% increase in deaths in Florida. China's one of the leading sources for fentanyl. I know the president has had some discussions, and I think he said he had some commitments. Can you maybe expound on where that's at in terms of fentanyl and the Chinese ability to produce that, and what we're trying to do as a part of this document, ideally?
Yeah, well, thank you, Congressman. First of all, you're right, there's a long history of failure by China to protect intellectual property. The first kind of modern example of it was a 301 that was brought in 1991 during the George Herbert Walker Bush administration, and then between 2010 to 2016, there were 10 different commitments where they agreed to do certain things, which commitments I would suggest were not lived up to, and therefore enforcement really is the biggest sort of thing. The president completely agrees with you on the issue of fentanyl. He specifically raised it with President Xi when we were in Buenos Aires at the dinner. President Xi, once again, I don't want to suggest that this is my area of expertise, because it isn't, but agreed that he would treat it as whatever the equivalent of a controlled substance is in China. And this is something that the president views himself as having a commitment on. It may very well be something that we end up writing into this agreement, but it clearly is something the president views himself as having a commitment on, and that we are monitoring to see if there, in fact, are changes. Very important to the country for all the reasons you said. I even made a veiled allusion to it in my opening statement. This idea of fighting opioids is as important as job training.
Let me add one other thing I just want to put on your radar. I know you've got a lot of things on your radar, but the ag community in Florida, Forestry, a couple of years ago, it did $8.4 billion. It's a big industry in our state. And in terms of exports to China, that's dried up for various reasons. We can talk about that at a later date. I just want to make sure that's something you're considering or looking at as well as part of the agreement.
No, I am. I actually have a list of specific issues that have been raised by members that are appropriate for the agreement, and it's something that we have raised and will continue to raise.
Thank you, and I yield back.